It is 7 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order and pass the chair to Deputy Mayor Smith.
Thank you. We don't have any delegations this evening. Are there any declarations of financial interest? Seeing none, can we get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, please? Councilor Collins.
I move that the agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconded by Councilor Barrett. Discussion on the agenda. Councilor Morrison.
Thank you. Under administration, item number 8, I'd like to add just a general administrative update. A bunch of small things that don't perhaps justify having their own little header for each, but that I can bring to council's attention.
Councilor Fox, Councilor Barrett, you're amenable to the bunch of small little things? Yeah. Further discussion on the agenda? Show of hands in favor? Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I just had I had some comments on the CRC Renovation Steering Committee, not related to the notes, but can I just make those comments at the time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, show of hands in favor? That carries unanimously. The minutes from February 2nd, corporate services were reviewed. February 16th, regular council. Any discussion? Councilor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment in regards to, I guess it's in relation to the delegation that was made at February 2nd meeting. And throughout the context of that delegation, there was strong emphasis put that about taxes going up. And it's also has since been further emphasized through Facebook posts. And I just wanted to quickly point out that taxes do have to go up. There is forced growth that the community realizes, cost of living, or just cost of goods and services going up and everything else. Earlier today, I wanted to see how we rated amongst the other major communities in the NWT. And during our budget deliberations, we're estimating about a 1% tax increase for residential properties, maybe a bit less, a bit more, but very minor. Whereas we look at our neighbors in Hay River, they're actually proposing a 2% tax increase, not specific to residential. It was sort of left open, but overall, they're looking at least a 2% increase. Yellowknife approved a 1.63 increase to their residential properties. The New Leaf 1.5. So I think 1.0%, which is probably realistic for us, is quite, in this day and age, when you look at cost of living and things like that, it's running anywhere from 1.5% to 2%. We're not even keeping up with cost of goods and services. So that's kind of what they're forward is that taxes will go up, but as a council, we were quite deliberate in our analysis of the budget, the impacts of the daycare and other stuff that we've taken on, and made a deliberate decision that yes, we need to increase taxes, but 1%. The average person is probably going to be about a $50 a year increase to their household expenses. For the level of service this community provides, I think that's a bargain. Okay, and I just wanted to be on record saying enough of this ranting about taxes going up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barrett. Yeah, just to re-emphasize the point that the 2021 budget does include a fully costed childcare center. And result is it's 2% overall property tax revenue increase, but not, it affects commercial, residential slightly differently. Anything further on the minutes, business values? Strategic plan, we'll move right into council priorities. Governance, bylaw review committee. Councilor Guerrero, you want to speak about that briefly?
Yes, the minutes are there, just checking my notes. Unfortunately, I didn't got any particular notes with respect to the bylaw review. I apologize for my unpreparedness. Let's see, just keep them fresh words here. Yeah, again, I believe that that meeting we were dealing with the proposed work on the council procedures bylaw. And just trying to get that finalized in order to council for a review and hopefully move that forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I believe there's a meeting scheduled for, I can't remember if it's this Thursday or next Thursday. We'll do so many meetings. Councilor Gilbert, I was wondering, on the bylaw review committee, we also have the council honorarium bylaw review. I believe you're a participant in the council honorarium bylaw. I'm just wondering if you had an update about that.
Is that one I did take notes for to talk about? We had a bylaw review or a honorary review meeting on January 27th, I believe was the date. The purpose of that meeting was primarily the first meeting of the committee and to introduce the material for the committee to look at. Some of it was providing an overview of the work that was done with the previous committee, along with other background materials related to what other communities and jurisdictions do in the way of council on area issues. We actually had a second meeting today at lunch hour, and a couple of the items that we looked at today was the honorary rates for communities across the NWT, 5 larger communities, and also a sampling of 5 of the communities from northern Alberta. From one of the questions that came forward is, for example, the mayor of High Level, according to their policy, receives a $18,000 yearly honoraria. However, when I looked at their budget and their policy, it was determined that last year the mayor there made $40,000 as they received per diems for committee meetings, council meetings, other meetings, training, stuff like that. So their base honorarium may be much lower than ones in the NWT, but when you start adding all those committee meetings and everything to it, at the end of the day, they're quite comparable to the NWT rates. Another question that was asked and I'm looking into is, if you look back a few bylaws ago, the 2012 bylaw, they changed the, here in Fort Smith, we changed how the deputy mayor was compensated. Prior to that, the deputy mayor would receive a slightly higher per diem than the rest of the councilors. And in 2012, the bylaw changed that to they received the same. So, and that was about it. So we have another meeting scheduled for I believe it's March 24th.
Thank you. Comment or questions from councilors? Councilor Cox, you had your hand up. Wasn't sure if it was in relation to honorarium or bylaw.
It was in relation to bylaw. I don't think we've had a regular minuted meeting of the bylaw review committee since our last public services, and we were just a workshop, which is why we haven't been. So, but yes, we have a meeting on Thursday.
Further discussion on the council honorarium bylaw, Councilor Westphal.
I guess one of mine is, one of concern or just wondering is, it's hard to, you're on this committee to sort of be advisory role without actually sort of guiding the group. Are you feeling that there's going to be some good teeth into the issue without trying to provide too much hand holding? It is nice to, it'd be ideal if we didn't have to be involved at all. I realize that's sort of maybe that's a trickier situation, but anyway, seems like there was good discussion. Creating this, is there some bite into the issue?
I'm sure if that was a comment or a question, Ms. Morrison.
I would just note that this is a committee and not an advisory board. As such, the council member is fully participatory in the meeting outcomes, and so it's not just a guidance or an advisory role as you would see in an advisory board. In the honorary committee, there are just 3 people, regardless of whether they're councillors or general members of the public.
Councilor Westphal.
Yeah, sorry, I quite understand that. My question more directly then is, do you feel like you're getting good discussion from the group members? And my concern is that I understand that it's a full committee member, but I have issues with council guiding discussion of what's supposed to be mostly public feedback for whether it's honorary.
Councilor Dubran.
I think it's a good, engaged group. It's quite apparent that they are reviewing the background material that's presented to them. They are bringing forward questions. I'm trying to avoid taking shall we say, a leading role in pushing them one way or another, trying to present the information that's out there in a very, I guess, impartial manner as best as possible. We've been doing the first 2 meetings we did by Zoom, and I'll be talking to administration about the possibility of doing our next one in person, because I think an in-person meeting will lead to a much more open discussion forum.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on council honorarium bylaw? Just for the members of the gallery and the benefit of the public, there's 3 members of the public involved in the committee with 1 council representative, and they are investigating and looking to make recommendation on council honorarium to be implemented for the incoming council, not this council. Communications committee, Councilor Cox.
Our last communications committee gathering was a workshop, so there are not formal minutes, there are notes. Which I'm not sure were shared with council, but I will certainly endeavor to share those with council moving forward. Again, we spoke about the topics for the March newsletter. We've been very consistent getting a monthly newsletter out. We also talked at length about messaging, about sharing information with regards to the motions we passed during our February 16th regular meeting. And as a result of that, the mayor has written both the Senior Society and the Curling Club letters regarding interim user agreements, and there's also a media release distributed a couple weeks ago now. We discussed our social media plan and ongoing advertising strategies. So in terms of other advertising strategies, we took some of the feedback we heard from council during our last public services meeting, and we'll be reaching out to Uncle Dave's Friendship Center to request that some of the information we share on our posters via social media is also added to the video channel. Share similar information that's easily compressible or short on the digital sign outside Rec Center. And also make arrangements for the printing of each newsletter for distribution at the rec center, town hall, library, health center, Northern Light Social Care Home, and Sunset Chalet. And again, we are inviting questions for our question period during regular council meeting. So that advertising will continue. That was essentially our February communications meeting.
Thank you. Comments or questions on communications committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Post-secondary education committee. Van Napier.
Thank you. We did have one very short meeting. I don't think we have minutes for the meeting, but we had talked about the proposed TED Talks or TED Style Talks, and that I had reached out to the mayor of Yellowknife as well, and looking for different panel members that we could include. So we're just working on that process right now with the intent to start engaging with panel members and starting the panels in April or May. It's a very short meeting.
Again, I think there's another meeting scheduled for next week. Members of the public can see that there's a lot of minutes. I'm sorry, there's a lot of meetings which are happening right now, which are creating a lot of minutes. Discussion, questions on post-secondary education? Okay, we'll keep moving. We're into Community Recreation Center Renovation Steering Committee. We don't formally have a chair. Deputy Mayor serves as the de facto chair at the last couple of meetings. So the minutes are in the package. There was meetings on February 23rd and February 25th. There's like so much to say, but I'm not really sure if most of council was there. Are there particular questions or comments on Community Recreation Center Committee, Steering Committee? Maybe you said you had something you'd like to talk about?
Yes, are we discussing both of them at the same time?
Well, are there any questions or comments on the February 23rd meeting, which was subsequently followed by the February 25th meeting? Councillor Cabral.
Chair, as part of that meeting, I guess, was, which I very much appreciated, was a tour of the basement or the kids gym and fitness room, change room, and the lobby area to it. And once I was able to see the size of the individual change rooms, they actually are a lot bigger than they appear to be when you look at the sketches. And I think we've had some people express concerns about the overall concept, and I think people would have their concerns would be much alleviated once they see what these change rooms actually are. They're not just like a toilet stall with banging your elbows into the walls. These are like 4 feet wide and like 8 to 10 feet long. So it would be really, I think, advantageous if people, once those rooms are finished down in the basement, were able to take a tour to see what the rest of the change rooms are going to look like in the rest of the facility. So in one of our upcoming meetings, we could provide a timeline of when that would be available for the public to view.
I think it's an excellent point. I'm not sure in terms of administration how easy that would be to arrange. Perhaps there could be a couple of scheduled viewings that don't interfere with construction. Councillor Cox?
On that note, we did have a recommendation from that steering committee meeting. to move at this at corporate services here. So I will move that the CRC Renovation Steering Committee approve the change in design as presented to bring to the corporate services standing committee meeting on February 2nd for further discussion.
Thank you. On the second motion. Councilor Brett. Discussion. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. I know there were many things discussed with respect to the change rooms. It was a moving meeting because we were actually moving while we were talking, so I don't know how accurately the minutes captured some of the discussion. I would also note that, as been stated very clearly by councillors, the public, has concerns and want to know that council has reviewed and considered their concerns. And then this did occur at the steering committee meeting, but I'll just reiterate for the minutes some of the things that were discussed. One is that the overall change room is perhaps a misnomer. As we noted, it is actually a lobby area to the pool, and this lobby area has 21 individual change rooms located off the lobby area. Some are individual change rooms, some are family change rooms, some have toilets, and some have showers. But these are discrete rooms. They're not like the stalls that you're used to in a current bathroom that you see. These are rooms with full-on, good old-fashioned doors that you can close and lock behind you. And so the way that this room would work is, unlike a current change room where you change in public, these rooms you change in the private of your own individual room, and you are never at any state of disrobe in the actual pool lobby. The pool lobby, which is surrounded by all the change rooms, has a sink. There's a public sink there, and that's the extent of it. You are fully clothed when you're in the lobby. There are lockers there for you to put your clothes in, and you would behave as you would in any other lobby, in any other building. You would sit and wait for your turn to enter into a change room and change. We think that this will actually create a safer environment for residents because there's no public nudity, there is no public changing. You can change on your own, so that it should reduce bullying and harassment amongst our younger users, because kids don't have to change in front of each other. It's going to be easier for people who manage large groups, whether it's parents or teachers or other programmers, because you no longer have to split your children by gender. Your kids will all be in one room. You can stick them in the rooms, get them changed, get them out. You can have your eyes on the kids at all times. You never have to worry about the kids that you're not watching. Your kids will no longer have to change in front of a stranger in the proposed layout. And then the final note is that, people say, well, just because we say, well, this is what they're doing down south now. And people say, well, just because that's what they're doing down south doesn't mean we have to do it up here. We're Fort Smith, we're different. The reason they're doing it down south, the primary reason is that they're creating facilities that don't differentiate by gender, because what the case law is showing nationally and internationally is that if you differentiate by gender, there's more than two now. And so you have to provide opportunities, additional change rooms, and as such, you're seeing people currently rebuilding facilities to reflect that need. We just have the opportunity to be in Renovations now to design a facility that addresses that need from this point moving forward. So it would save us future costs doing it this way to build in anticipation of those requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Yeah, the tour of the basement really illustrated that. I think that the size of the individual change rooms is about 10 feet long by 4 feet wide approximately. And I know some members of council haven't had an opportunity to see them yet, and hopefully we can facilitate that. Councilor Campbell, I think you had a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to see the public get a chance before we approve this change order or whatever, to go have a look at these prices before, let them have a say what they think of it all. Because it seems like we're just pushing it down their throats and everything. I'm all for it. I know what you're for, but we got to public, the people that asked questions last time about it, at our last little session there. But I feel we have to get the public down there within, we could pass this next week before we get too far along. Let the public come down there and take a look.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. I agree with you. I think I just made that comment earlier. The recommendation, approving the recommendation tonight means that it comes back to regular council meeting in 2 weeks for formal approval, so there's a bit of time there. But your comments are noted. Councilor Goff?
I just wanted to speak to my support for the motion, both philosophically as administration already addressed about having options for people who may not identify or who identify as not male or female. In addition to that, I support the design because it is a more efficient use of space. It allows when there are more women in the, and people who identify as female on the female side of the existing change rooms. So this will actually provide more space and spaces for them to change in, and they won't have to necessarily wait if there was the same space available on what is right now the male side. So I support the motion. I support the design both on a philosophical level and on a practical level because it is a more efficient use of space and resources.
Thank you. Further discussion on the recommendation? Mayor?
Do we know when the change rooms downstairs will be as finished as possible to give a better idea of how they're going to look completed? I have been in them in the past 2 weeks, but when the doors are going to be on so that the public would feel it. Right, okay.
I don't have a date for full completion of the rooms. Right now you have rooms that the walls are there, the doors are there. What they're lacking are the finishes. So you might not have floor treatments or wall treatments or fixtures like doorknobs and whatnot, but you can get a sense. I think one of the things that people really get out of it beyond the size is that when you think stalls, you think what you see when you walk into a washroom normally where you can peek underneath or peek over and they're made of rattly tin. These are substantive rooms. They're a room you walk in, you lock the door, and that is your room for the duration. And I think that, the current state, we can look and talk to the contractor about the possibilities of running some public tours or having sign-up lists for people who want to get down there. So it's good, again, we're still in COVID, so managing the number of people and the interruption on the contractor, we can look to arrange something that will occur within the next 2 weeks, such that, if any negative opinions remain, they'll have the opportunity to bring those to council and inform council's final vote in 2 weeks from now. But as the deputy mayor stated, I don't know that would preclude advancing a recommendation at this point. The recommendation just ensures that the topic is there for future consideration at the council meeting.
Thank you.
I don't, let's deal with the recommendation on the floor. I do think we are hearing a consensus from council that some form of public access needs to be enabled. Maybe it's a sign up, on a Saturday afternoon, on a Monday morning, on a Wednesday evening, something that is at different times for different people's schedules. And there's 5 slots or 10 slots, and people can sign up if they're interested. It is really illuminating seeing them because you recognize that you don't walk into a change room. It's a lobby area that has sinks and stuff in it, which is directly attached to each gym, and then there's individual change rooms. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what it might actually architecturally be like. All right, we do have a recommendation on the floor. Is there any further discussion on the recommendation, Mr. Morrison?
Sorry, I also add that the current change rooms are about to undergo demolition, not construction, because again, we don't have that particular area of the room approved yet, but they're going under demolition, and in order to keep the pool operational, 3 temporary change rooms are in the process of being constructed on the pool deck that people will be required to use. So, so those will be another opportunity for the public to see sort of the change room versus change in a washroom approach that we hope to transition to.
Thank you. Further discussion on the recommendation? Show of hands in favor? That's carried unanimously, and we'll move forward to regular meeting of council. Sorry for my scattered introduction to the beginning of the minutes. With the February 25th meeting also has another recommendation, but is there any further discussion on the February 23rd?
There's a second recommendation.
Yeah, yes. Yep. Is there any further discussion on the meetings of February 23rd? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to February 25th, which oh, my apologies, I missed that recommendation on the last page there. Councilor Cox?
The recommendation coming from the steering committee is that the CRC Renovation Steering Committee schedule a meeting with the Curling and Winter Sports Club to discuss next steps in the reconfiguration of the curling match space.
Thank you. Councilor Gilbert, second that motion. The recommendation. Any discussion? The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 5:15 p.m. Ms. Morrison?
Thank you. The intent of the meeting is to discuss some of the requested changes from the curling club, such as the secondary entrance and whether, those are possibilities. And so the intent is to meet with them on site and talk about potential changes to the lounge space.
Thank you. And that's resulting in the feedback that happened in the week of earlier in February when we had user group meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Sorry, the recommendation? Seeing none, show of hands in favor. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to the Thursday, February 25th meeting, which held here in council chambers, discussing user agreements. It's a fairly lengthy meeting. One criticism I've heard of council is that there's been a lot of discussions about rec center renovations not happening in the public. One of the reasons that the steering committee was created was to ensure that there's transparency for the public so that you can actually read what the discussions are, and the minutes are excellent in this read, and they've been compiled in a very quick fashion. So it's much appreciated to be part of this corporate services standing committee meeting. Are there any questions? Well, there's a recommendation. I don't know if let's start with the recommendation. Councilor Cox?
Start with the recommendation. I'm sure it will generate some discussion. Recommendation, I use the recommendation that mayor and council and administration enter into negotiations with the Senior Society and Curling and Winter Sports Club for the intent to develop long-term use agreements for access to community recreation center space.
Thank you. Second on the motion? Two of you were there. Councilor Gouretz? Discussion. Councilor Cox, you want to speak to the motion? The recommendation, sorry.
The recommendation was moved with the understanding that both leaseholders, that this was their wish to enter into negotiations with the town to develop long-term use agreements for access to the community recreation center once renovations are complete. As we know, as has been previously discussed, there will also be interim use agreements that will be developed for use and access to the facility during the renovations, but this motion or this recommendation specifically addresses the negotiation of long-term use agreements.
Thank you. Councilor Gouretz?
Further to Councilor Cox's comments there. As part of this whole discussion, there was, concern from councillors about the perception that not acting on this immediately would be kicking basically the proverbial kicking can down the road analysis. And More specifically, the Senior Society has indicated that they would like to see some commitment from the town with respect to future access and use of the seniors' room. And a lot of the discussions that led to this motion was to give the seniors and the current the assurance that the town does and will sit down with them to talk about the use of that space by them and the use of the space by the town on an as-needed basis for other programming related to seniors, curling club, and other youth groups amongst the community. Long story short, it was felt that this is something we, as this council, has to deal with. We can't wait until completion of the renovations, which is going to be another council, possibly a year down the road, and just leave them sort of wondering what is the future of our organizations within this facility. So I think the motion to enter into discussions and negotiations is really pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the recommendation? Councilor Campbell?
Well, why should we, just leave it be, let them have their room there? I still feel strong for that. And, they're the seniors of our town. They're the people that put us all here and everything. Let's give them a chance. That's their own little space and let them have it. It's not very big. Let them enjoy it. We're all gonna be there. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Further discussion on the recommendation? Hearing nothing. Sorry, my neighbor.
Thank you. I am in support of the recommendation to enter into negotiations with both the Senior Society and the Community Winter Sports Club regarding the long-term use agreement. And I think this should also include the interim use agreements. I don't think that was covered under the earlier motion. In my conversation with the seniors, there is still a lot of uncertainty regarding the 60-day notice with what the storage will look like in the meantime, where the items would be moved, who will move them, and I don't think that would be covered under the long-term use agreement. And I will speak to the use of the room afterward. I will have my conversation with the seniors afterward.
Thank you. Are you suggesting an amendment to the recommendation? The discussion did take place around interim use agreements versus long-term use agreements. I think as Councilor Cox summarized, the feeling was that was what was being heard from the Senior Society and the curling clubs, the long-term concern.
I agree that we do need to discuss the long-term concern, but also just provide some certainty around I guess this short-term 60 days storage of items, etc., through construction.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Do you have a comment on this?
My recollection, the way the agenda was set up for the steering committee is that the final use agreement was on the agenda before interim use, and when the dialogue happened around interim use, i.e. after the motion to meet with seniors, I think, if I recall correctly, where the discussion went to was that the interim use and the final use agreement were to a certain extent related, and that both conversations would happen at the same time. Having said that, as far as the interim use agreements, if there's any sort of operational concerns around moving of things and storage of things, we can certainly administratively address that, right? We have purchased a large sea container for temporary storage, movement of items as part of our agreement with the contractors. So we can certainly look to do that. We need to have productive dialogue with the leaseholders in order to flesh those things out. Perhaps that dialogue can happen as part of this proposed meeting. And in that vein, if we have unanimous support on this vote to go into discussions with the seniors, and perhaps we can arrange this meeting prior to full-on council approval, so that we're not waiting another 2 weeks to have that dialogue.
Councilor Collins?
Just to address Councillor Campbell's comments about, how I interpret it as leaving them be in the room. So I interpret that as leaving them with the existing lease. And so I just wanted to address that comment and my interpretation of it. Is that the council did vote to terminate the lease with the Senior Society, as well as the lease with the Curling Fund, to facilitate construction and renovation in the building, and that the long-term use agreements that we would negotiate with them, the intent is that those would replace, that the long-term use agreement would replace the lease. So they have requested that that agreement be negotiated sooner than later. That's certainly my understanding. So that's, I'll be voting in favor of the recommendation.
Further comments from council on the recommendation? And I know you had some other comments that you wanted to make. Did that make specific to the recommendation?
They're not specific to
Okay.
the recommendation.
Sorry, Councilor Westwell, did you have your hand up on the, or are you voting? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just that we're sort of entering into slightly uncharted territory. Though I'm supportive, as we have been asked to, more immediately negotiate this. So, and I, as the minutes reflect, am very much in favor of moving this along quickly. But what does this look like going forward? I guess is that we haven't really negotiated as a council with anybody over anything before, besides a collective agreement which we assigned a negotiating team to. So normally our lease agreement was brought to us by administration. Here's the kitchen leases or the other spaces leases are usually brought to us more as administration. But this time we are making a commitment to negotiate with the user over space as council. I don't have a previous example of us doing this, so I'm just wondering if there's been thought or consideration as to how exactly we intend to do that. Because there's going to have to be some consultation amongst council and amongst administration, I suspect, to make sure that we are going forward with, not someone's opinion of how they think they heard something that said, but actually what is our, what is our clear, who are our people, who are they going to be talking to, who's the senior to be talking to, who's speaking on behalf of the people who are negotiating the agreement.
I think ultimately the mayor is the spokesperson for council, and we're working with motions and recommendations to empower the mayor. But you're right. I mean, this is the closest thing I can think of is the user group meetings at the arena, and the controversy over dressing room 6. There were delegations associated with that, but there was never any negotiation or discussion of an actual agreement. So, no pressure. Mr. Martin?
Typically, if you're negotiating, you know your position, your final position, where you start, where you end. If I go into bargaining, I'm given parameters by council. I don't know if council has established these parameters. So I think the term negotiation is a difficult one. That was the recommendation of the steering committee. Perhaps you wish to become informed first or have discussions first to understand the needs of the user group better, so that you can then meet as council to determine your your position. It seems relatively, a semantic exercise, but I think if we've learned anything in this process is that semantics are very important. The words we use will be scrutinized, and they have to be chosen carefully as a result.
Ms. Morrison. Councilor Wetzel.
So I guess that's it. It sort of covers one of my concerns as well, right? Is that, the opportunity for a councillor to make a comment about what may be perceived or what the understanding is versus, because again, we don't actually know what, as council, we haven't sat down and determined what our space was, and that's what was different with the dressing rooms. We all voted, our decision was to get out of lock and key spaces within the rec center or within the arena. And then that was sort of separate to the discussions with the user groups. It was when the user groups, I guess, when it came up that it was pushed that the user group wanted that to be different, that's what started a whole conversation, which was sort of forced it to be a position, to take a position, but it never really was a negotiation. It was just a council made a position after, I guess, advocacy from a number of our user groups. So yeah, we don't have formally a position. And as I spoke to in the minutes here, make sure that I sort of said that what my personal position was, but as a council, we haven't adopted a particular position that we need to go into arguing with. Is our position going to be that we're out of lock and key leases within our facilities or lock and key user arrangements outside of obvious cases where occupational health and safety or liability or other requirements are for operation, or we haven't really ironed this out. So it's worthwhile that, though I am all for moving forward with meeting their expectations for us to start negotiating we're coming up with a plan and presenting them with an actual user agreement, we do actually probably want to settle our position first. And I just don't know if that's why I'm asking if this is something that council sees that we would be doing after we pass this. We would set our terms, or we're going to come up with that position first and then say they're moving forward with negotiations. Because I would assume when they say we're moving forward, the expectation would be that there'd be meetings with the user groups rather quickly, that we start some sort of negotiating process. But council hasn't announced their position yet.
Councilor Wetzel. So a bit of a conundrum, wanting to be responsive and maintain ongoing dialogue to find some kind of common ground. Yet, what's his position? So we have a recommendation on the floor. We can choose to vote on the recommendation. We can amend the recommendation. We can table the recommendation. It's a little council.
Thank you. Just to clarify that in the motion where it says that we enter into negotiations, that is not to say that we can't have meetings beforehand where, like, I think ultimately the intent is to negotiate the agreement, but we would be meeting with the different groups to talk about the use of the space and use that information to guide our position.
Thank you. Councilor Thomas?
Yeah, I think I agree with Aaron here on this point, and that is that the recommendation is to enter into negotiations. It doesn't. I think we need to sit down with the user group to figure out what the agreements will look like, and I don't think we can. Our position as a council, I expect, will be informed by our discussions with the user groups. I think the recommendation as I read it is open enough, but it's not specifying what what our position is going into those negotiations. Is that what you were, is that your concern, Councilor?
Oh, I guess as a secondary concern, or it's connected, my main question was, what does this look like going forward? Is this, we're saying we're going to negotiations, but we have never, that's made a user group negotiations task force or team or anything before. So what is this going to look like? That's more of an information question. But secondly, we haven't adopted a position. So going into negotiations with no position is, I think, going to just generate a continuance of the sort of mess that we have had missteps along the way. And I personally, as the minutes reflect that I've been coming to, think that it would be probably wise for us to at least adopt some form of position or open up that wound or that to discuss what exactly our goal or position is before going into negotiations, because going into negotiations without a position. And we've heard from the user groups, we know what they want. So if we consider that and move on with the position and then move forward negotiations, because it's a give and take from that point forward.
Thank you. Councilor Prevet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to propose a minor modification to the wording of the motion, or the recommendation, I should say. And it would read that the mayor and council and administration enter into meaningful discussions leading to negotiation. I don't know if that would address some of the concerns. And I think part of the reason this motion is try to capture some of the urgency that the seniors feel that they would like in knowing what the future within our recreation facility is like. And I'm quite concerned that there is a concern there. I think we've been quite forward saying that they are a very significant component within our recreational complex. The room is being basically assigned to them for their use at their priority request and things like that. And that basically we're just looking at the ability to be able to use it for related activities in program delivery. So we have to enter into discussions with the parties, both the seniors and the curling club, regarding the uses of that space. And those discussions should lead to a negotiated users agreement that alleviates their concerns about the future.
Thank you. So you're proposing an amendment to the recommendation, enter into meaningful discussion leading to negotiations. Councilor Cox, you are amenable to that? So that's the change to the recommendation. Further discussion on the recommendation? Councilor Campbell?
Okay, well, why don't we, before we go into negotiation, why don't we have some discussions with the seniors and the curling club and see what, with just 3 counselors and 3 of each of those organizations, and see where they want, what we can do instead of going to negotiation. Let's get a sort of a parameter where we want to all head what direction with this agreement of usage and stuff. Instead of just hearing it all the time back and forth, this and this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. As we're just reiterating some of the conversation of the steering committee was that the steering committee felt like it needed to respond to the request to put some kind of parameters around what long-term use would look like, rather than, I think the specific concern was the word intent. We intend to do this. Well, do you or don't you? And I think that this recommendation was to alleviate that concern around kind of your neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I believe that the amendment to the recommendation submitted by Councillor Couvret and Councillor Cox was approved to modify it to enter into meaningful discussion leading into negotiations. So that, I think, would address your concern around having conversations with the seniors.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a recommendation on the floor. It's been amended. I think we've talked. I think we're all maybe a little uncomfortable with exactly how this is playing out, because I've really done this before. But further discussion on the recommendation. Councillor Campbell?
Who's gonna make up this, who's gonna enter into the discussions and agreement? Like, is it gonna be a steering committee or some other committee or what?
That has yet to be decided, and it isn't contained within the recommendations, so it will have to be discussed and decided. Okay, if there's further discussion, show of hands in favor. The recommendation as amended. Not sure if Councillor Westfall threw this pen or was. Sorry, you were voting in favor? Thank you. So it's carried unanimously. Many of you had some comments as well?
Yes, I do, thank you. After we had met with the seniors earlier in February, they had discussions with some other members of our community, including with the local Indigenous government leadership. On February 19th, I met with President Heron and Chief Petra in regards to their meeting with the Senior Society, and they had requested that the seniors, the Indigenous government leaders, and the town meet on March 1st, which was yesterday. So I did attend a meeting yesterday afternoon. It lasted about an hour and a half. And I think that from that meeting, there was a lot of valuable input that came from the seniors and their a better understanding of their position and their concern. Aside from the comments that I had made earlier about the interim agreement, the storage movement of the items that are currently in the space, there were some questions, and I do understand, according to the minutes, that there, and with my calendar, we do have a steering committee meeting tomorrow with the Rowing Club, but I would like to also set up a steering committee meeting to discuss in more detail the information that I'm presenting this evening about the seniors position. So just some brief notes from my meeting leading into a further discussion. The meeting was with the executive of the Senior Society, the local Indigenous governments, and myself. There was a lot of discussion about the 23 years of usage by the Senior Society in the seniors room. There was concern about uncertainty around what changes will be used in the room, but also having conversations with the seniors about what, I guess, a partnership or collaboration in what changes will be made in the room. What I had really heard and kind of extrapolated from the meeting, while some of this I think was not directly said, is that there is a huge emotional and personal connection for the seniors to that space, and in that it feels to them as it is a collective home for the seniors, where there is a I think, a fear of losing that collective home. So when we are talking about replacing the items that they had fundraised for, such as the stove and the fridge and any other items that are in there, those items, it's not so much I think about the fundraising, but that those were items that they chose to make the space more of their home. So my understanding is that the town controlling who goes into the space is to them, like us being a landlord of their home, and then letting ourselves in at our will, and letting other people in at our discretion rather than to theirs. And so I think that's where the control of the space is an issue. So I think that there are some fears that need to be addressed, and I do believe that it was a very fruitful discussion, and I would like to, the meeting was just yesterday, so I don't have complete notes, but I think that that kind of hopefully gives council a better understanding of where the seniors are coming from in the position regarding the lease portion of their concerns. So I would like to look at having a steering committee meeting sometime this week to discuss the concerns that the seniors have about their space.
Okay, thank you. Really noted. I'm sure what the scheduling options are, and we'll look at them. Mr. Morrison?
There is a steering committee meeting tomorrow at 5. Council has the opportunity, or the members of the committee have the opportunity to schedule their next meeting at that time.
Thank you. Further discussion on community recreation center renovations? Not seeing a lot of hands going up quickly. We're still on governance council priorities, but we move now to a totally different subject, fire damage. Ms. Morrison?
Thank you. There's some renewed interest from the GNWT regarding some of the obstacles we were seeing to fire abatement, namely what funds were available and the spending of those funds on preventative fire abatement activities was supported by one government department. It was being delayed by another with the requirement to put reserves on land, requirements that are there when a forest fire is coming. You want to cut a fire break when there's a forest fire coming. There's no concerns about it, but you want to proactively cut a fire break, which happens at less cost, at less stress to the community. Now there are all sorts of regulations in the way, and with that comes the requirement for stewardship of the fire break afterwards, which is something we weren't looking for. We don't want to own the fire break. We just want to cut down some trees to stop a future fire. So anyways, there has been no action on that front. I think the mayor spoke with the person who is both Minister of Lands and Minister of ENR, and we are seeing some action from ENR. Unfortunately, the obstacle is with the Department of Land. So we'll see if we see any real results, but at least there is some dialogue happening in the project. Of course, we're at less than a month to spend the funds at this point, so it might just be a lot of hot fuss about nothing.
Thank you for that unfortunate update. It's, I don't want to rant about this, but considering the number of times that we brought forward to GNWT, the need for the GNWT to take responsibility for commissioners' lands within municipal boundaries. It's been actively discussed over the last 6 or 7 years, for sure, if not longer than that. It's really disheartening that one arm of government that has the same minister as the other arm of government cannot find a way to work together to actually help the municipality that wants to protect itself. It's very disappointing. Thank you for the update. Further comments, questions on fire abatement? Okay. Childcare. Ms. Morrison?
Nothing substantive. We continue staffing and sometimes restaffing positions. It requires a lot of skilled people to run a daycare of this size, early childhood education, training, certification, that sort of thing. Numbers continue to increase, and we maintain our commitment to run the daycare program and the after-school care program throughout the construction of the facility, throughout the renovation. So that will require a little bit of nimbleness in our thinking to ensure that we run this program while meeting all the requirements of the authority having jurisdiction, ECB, but we certainly think it's possible.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Westphal?
I just like to note that it appears that the best and most affordable play structure in the town of North Smith is a giant pile of snow. And good planning on that.
Thank you. So if there's nothing further, we have Community Recreation Center on the council priorities list. I'm not sure if there's any further updates that need to be discussed beyond what has already been discussed. Nothing from administration?
No, we're in the process of reviewing construction drawings for the basement work, so mechanical, electrical, IT systems, those sorts of things to make sure those are nailed down, and as well as hardware schedules, the right kinds of doorknobs, light fixtures, these sorts of things. So all that's underway for the basement, which is further advanced than the rest of the facility, and we're in the process of getting the change order out as approved by council. Of course, the information has been transmitted that approval of proposed floor plans are all but the change room that council is going to continue to deliberate on the change room before bringing forward their position on that. And then also there is some of the library work we are sitting on until we have consultations with the curling club around access to the curling lounge on the second floor and alternate exits and how we manage exits and washrooms for that space. So that might impact library layout a little bit. Nothing significant.
Thank you. Is there anything on council? There isn't. The last item on council priorities is Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I don't think it was actually a council meeting, but we recognized that Town of Inuvik is the latest municipality in the NWT, along with Yellowknife and Fort Smith, to adopt the recommendations. Is there any other updates on Truth and Reconciliation? No, thank you. We'll finally get into Director's Report. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. Mr. Kidd, you have a hard act of contentious debate to follow.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much. We are preparing for the auditors, which will be here in the very near future. Our staff, as usual, working very hard. We're doing audit prep only this year, so on top of our regular duties. Good job. Recently, we received the school tax rate from the GNWT. So we will be preparing the mill rate calculation in the very near future. We do not expect any major changes from the board revision later this month. So If there's going to be any changes to the matter rate, if we can go a combination. Judge Brad, do I have any other issue on the agenda? On this, thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions on the director's report? My understanding is there's only one appeal going to the Board of Revision.
Thank you. That's my understanding as well. There's a little bit of housekeeping work, one appeal, and it has to do with the Housing Corporation's lots on St. Anne's. And so again, we still don't know what action the Housing Corporation intends to take on the recent correspondence from the mayor. We have received some correspondence from the Housing Corporation recently. It was circulated to council. But it is on something different. It's around accessing TNHC and Housing Corporation housing funds. So you're invited to attend that. All the council is. We're going to have a long talk if you want me to start building houses too.
I guess the motivation of council there is a way to assist in leveraging funds so that more housing can be built. That's on the 18th, I believe, of March. So what's all?
Yeah, the Health Residents has a good position here under advisement from the Sustainable Development Advisory Board that it was actually the CMHC and BT Housing Authority funds for development of community housing strategies that actually brought it to council like 2 years ago after visiting the NWTAC AGM, where the paperwork was provided then. So I think it's the same program. They just put it on pause for COVID. And then I believe, I guess I haven't seen all the information, but I suspect this is what they're coming in for as well. But that was the user group or the partner group before who said these are the things that we fund. In most cases for actually funding building infrastructure, they want it to be a community partnership of communities, indigenous groups, nonprofits, all that, which sort of takes it off of a single mandate of any group, which makes it challenging. But of course they want that feather in the cap kind of project that brings everyone together. But at the same time, they are interested in supporting housing analysis and studies that look to solve sort of a holistic community housing strategy. So that's where we may actually have some luck. Hopefully.
Thank you for that environmental update. Further discussion, Councilor
Related to the corporate services activity and taxes, I was just wondering if there was any timeline that could be made available to us regarding the introduction of the mill rate details, the mill rate bylaw for this year.
Again, I believe we're waiting on the GNWT. Ms. Morrison?
Yeah, we hope to bring it next week. And that's what Mr. K was alluding to without being specific. We have the information of the assessment rules, we have the mill rate, we can do all the calculations, realize that the results of the Board of Revision will impact the assessment rule. And we set mill rates to meet approved budgetary revenue requirements. And so if the assessment rule changes and the revenue outcomes, we think that the outcome of the Board of Revision with only one appeal before it will be so minor as to not have any impact, which is why we're bringing the mill rate bylaw forward prior to conclusion of Board of Revision meeting, and realize, unless we get full council in 2 weeks, that the actual final approval of the mill rate bylaw would move till April anyway. So we hope to get it out. And part of that analysis is, as per discussions during the budget process, we're looking at changing the weighting of the various zones, and we will bring the option with increased weighting on institutional for council's consideration.
Thank you. Further comments, questions, director's report. In the package for your review, of course, is the accounts paid list, correspondence, license report, as they always are. We've already talked a little bit about the bylaw review committee, which is working on bylaw review. Tonight will be coming to council. Administration, we have 2 items, COVID-19 update and a bunch of little things on the admin update. Sorry, Brand Napier, did you have?
I had a couple comments about correspondence.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
That's okay, thank you. Council had sent a request to the NLA to meet, and there was some back and forth discussion, but I did have a chance to speak with her, and she has suggested if council is available, she is available this Saturday from 1 o'clock to meet with council. However, if council is not available on that date, we can look at scheduling another date. So I think I'm just looking to see what council's availability is. And then the next was just under a review of the correspondence, the donation request for the March 2021 dog races. I think it's normally around the time of the Wood Buffalo Frolics, and we had passed a bylaw previously about Wood Buffalo Frolics civic holiday. I know that there is no Wood Buffalo Frolics this year. Is the town, are we still going to be having a half day holiday? I think the school has it scheduled in their calendar as a half day.
Thank you, good point, Ms. Morrison.
We have no intention, but that's a fine idea, and we want to give those kids another reason to get an afternoon off, because they all come and stay in the after-school care program and make us more money. We'll review it and bring a note to council for next week. The only other comment, people are slowly whittling down my list of little things to talk about is with respect to the MLA, is that council may have to decide whether they wish to meet on record or not. If it's not an official meeting, it's not minuted. You may wish to have your conversations with the MLA minuted. That's if they delegate it to a meeting, they would be minuted.
Thank you. Was there anything further, Brandon?
Yes, I just thank Mr. Morrison for his comments, and I do know that the Lodge is currently in session discussing, I believe, O&M budget, so it may be preferable to have a meeting sooner rather than later.
We can have a special meeting.
I think we would have 2 days notice if we were to have a special meeting of council, so I don't know that we need to do that tonight, Mr. Morrison.
Oh, I don't need a recommendation, motion of council or a recommendation from council to set a special meeting. It can come direct from the mayor. And with that, we could advertise it tomorrow in anticipation of Saturday meeting if the will of council is there. Or you can just meet. Again, this is sort of, we're more looking at the will of council right now than anything else.
Thank you. Councilor Campbell, did you have a comment? No? I'm not sure if the councilors are available to meet on Saturday. I know that I am not. Councilor Westwell?
I would just like to note that I do support others actually having a minuted meeting. I found that certain irony came up when I was asked to sign a petition to re-widen the runway by the previous MLA who was presented to council when we were upset about the narrowing of the runway. And that the minutes didn't exist for these. A lot of it, all the delegations of the last sitting, because they were all informal workshop meetings, or they were never really minute meetings. It was an informal meeting. And the record of discussions is lacking when you don't have an actual meeting. And I would hate for that to be the situation.
Thank you. Mayor Hager?
Thank you. I can pull availability of council after the council meeting, and we can look at schedule budgets that works with the MLA and with council, and then look at holding a special meeting after that.
Thank you. Ms. Cox?
I'll just note that Saturday is both the Tobacco Market and the first day of the Big Fun Snowboard event and snowboarding territorials here in Portsmouth.
also nothing stopping the mayor from having private conversations with the MLA, pushing town agenda items for budgetary discussions in the interest of expedience in the interim. But yes, as we all know.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Marshall, I'm a little lost in the agenda there. We were knee deep in your update?
COVID update.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, not a lot to talk about. Vaccinations are here in the community. Go get your vaccinations. I didn't get a button. I got my first one today. It's not difficult. It's about 45 minutes of your life, but it's in a room full of people you know. So there's always someone there that you can talk to responsibly at a distance with a mask on. It's a little bit of sitting, waiting, not nearly as much as what I thought it would be. There's no lineups out the door or anything. I think one person parked funny apparently and had to get talked to by the people who manage the building. But there's no chaos. It's quite calm. If you look like you're going to cry when they give you the needle, they'll make you look away. And then you have to sit for around 15 minutes to make sure that there's no ill effects. All in all, a positive experience. I did not throw horns afterwards. I'm feeling well and healthy, and I look forward to getting my second shot in a month. I would also tell council that our current collective agreement is robust, and it allows 3 hours of casual leave, untracked casual leave that's not held against you for medical procedures. And so we put a notification out to all our staff that they can take up to 3 hours during working hours to go and get their shot. And we've waived the requirement for any supporting paperwork for employees that go do that. I'm not certain that the GNWT is being as permissive as us. While I was getting my shot, they bumped into a nervous looking individual who had snuck out of her government office to go and get her shot. And when she found out it was going to take upwards of 45 minutes or an hour, she said, I guess I'll have to go back to my office now, because if we want to get it during working hours, we have to take annual leave. So I don't know if that was a decision of one office manager, if it's a GNWT-wide position, but it certainly seems counter to sort of what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you. The GNWT collective agreement has a casual leave clause for up to 2 hours for any scheduled medical appointments, so I don't know why that would be the case. All that is to say, it's one thing to comment, because we are routinely complaining about the government of Northwest Territories. This is one instance where they need to be lauded, along with our local health and social services staff and management. I think we're in a very enviable position compared to many places in the country that we're already rolling out vaccines to fully healthy adults. It's just another reason to live here. Anything else from administration?
I just see a general update. We spoke to some of the invitations that are out from council. We've yet to receive response from the DBA to sit and meet there. So I'm not sure if council would wish for us to continue to pursue, but we've been unsuccessful to date. And there is an invitation out to the superintendent of Wood Buffalo National Park. And I'm not sure that we scheduled a delegation for that yet. So we've yet to receive a response. We provided a number of dates throughout the March cycle. Mislanding First Nation. So council's been present in previous discussions about the removal of the low-level radioactive waste from the town of Fort Smith landfill. That work is scheduled to happen this summer. We've reviewed the processes that it's not the government, it's Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, which is previously been a federal agency. It's been turned into it's a private enterprise now. We've reviewed the process that they wanted to use. We've revised the process to reduce the amount of handling, because previously their intent had been to excavate the low-level radioactive waste, set it on our site sort it and then remove it. We said, no, if you put it in that hole, there's nothing to sort. You take it all and you only handle it once. And so now they're going to be excavating it, loading it directly into vehicles and hauling it from site. And so we're in the process of putting that use agreement in place. But through that process, we realized that they weren't hauling it very far. They're hauling it to Fort Fitzgerald, and they're temporarily storing it with the low-level radioactive waste that's currently stored there. So when we first, this was almost a year ago, when we first entered into discussions with CNL about their plans to issue a contract to remove the waste, we contacted Smith Landing First Nation at that time to say, you know, we should stay on the same page with this because you have low-level radioactive waste located in your community too. And they said, well, we hadn't been contacted yet, which seemed strange. And it was only after we did some research that we determined that the site upon which the low-level radioactive waste in Fort Fitz is located was not part of their TLE. It was retained by the federal government. It was retained by Department of Fisheries and Oceans. If I were to hazard a guess, I would presume it's because the site was contaminated and the Fed was unwilling to transfer it as part of the TLE. But it's created this situation now. It's right there in the community. There's a piece of federally administered land, and the federal administrators of that land is deemed to allow the temporary, where temporary is is an unknown, right? Of temporary storage of not only existing low-level radioactive contaminated waste, but all the stuff coming out of our landfill. While it is not our intent, I would hate for the word on the street to say that Fort Smith sent all its hazardous waste to Fort Fitz. It's certainly not what we're trying to do. It is what this CNL is attempting to do. My hands are relatively tied administratively. There's nothing to stop me from signing the use agreement. I have contacted Smith Landing First Nation on multiple occasions to try and get their position on it. I haven't had a great deal of response. I've got, we'll call you back, and not got the call back. So I'm wondering if this is something that council would wish to perhaps pursue politically. Otherwise, from my point of view, I can sign the agreement that allows them to take the low-level radioactive waste out of my landfill. But they're just going to put it on the other side of the border, and that border is an imaginary line on a piece of paper, right? So that's for council to consideration if you wish to provide direction or think about how you'd like to act on that. So I can leave that there for some conversation, or I can move on to some of my other items.
Just a question, is there a timeline on this? It seems very strange to be moving, I realize it's low level radioactive waste, but it seems very strange to be moving it upstream.
All the science appears to state that, the radioactivity of this low-level radioactive waste is lower than the background radiation of the country rock in the area. So I don't see it as being very hazardous. This is, however, different waste than I think what we're used to dealing with. And I'm not an expert in it. That's why, I have a difficulty providing advice or taking a position on it. But it gets its level of radioactivity based on one highly radioactive piece inside a certain volume. And instead of sorting it at the time, they just took a whole volume of dirt and segregated it. And now, of course, they want to sit and sort it on town Fort Smith property because the cost of sorting it and just moving that tiny little piece is a lot less expensive than moving that whole volume. We told them we would not allow that because we don't want that sorting happening in our landfill. Waste gets caught up in excavator tracks, driven across site, maybe not to be found again. But so they're, again, being very expeditious in the removal of Fort Smith. But the people in charge of oversight in Smith Landing are going to be PFO. And I don't know that they have perhaps the same thoughts on the issue, right? Especially when they haven't even put much effort into communicating with Smith Landing First Nation that I'm aware of.
Sorry, just to reiterate the question, is there a deadline on needing to make a decision?
they wish to have the work tendered and in place for this summer's construction season. So a tender will take a month to put out, a month to award. We're looking at, they'll want to hear from us relatively soon.
Okay, thank you. So the timeline. Councilor Westphal, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just mostly, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I don't think we can be participatory in that type of arrangement. I feel like it sort of goes against what we're trying to accomplish here, or certainly puts us partnering with, or now knowing about it makes it, now that we're acknowledged, we can't participate in the process of what they're continuing to do the same BS they've been doing for the last 80 years. I mean, my biggest issue though is that we've been lied to. When I sat in the meeting where we were told it goes in the truck, it leaves the area. That was bar none. That was the idea. We didn't want it going a little bit down the road into another pile. That was specifically what they told us they weren't going to do. But that's, I wish I was surprised, but unfortunately I'm not. It's just that it's disgusting. And for it to go the other way, when 9-10 years ago, this all started when they asked us to put that dirt here. And instead, it's bewildering and disturbing and disgusting. I don't want us to be subject to literally dumping our radioactive waste in our, Indigenous government's friends down the road backyard, because that's not ours. It's not our problem. That's just, I can't believe that they would be, except that they've got a previous track record of such behavior, but I think that's disgusting that it's still, that's the approach. And just sort of being able to go back on the intent was to get rid of the damn stuff.
Thank you, Councilor Westphal. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for the update. I agree with Councilor Westphal. I believe I was still a councillor when they first came before us and had presented the idea of storing all of the South Slave low-level radioactive waste in our landfill. And since that time, we had further meetings with them and did express that we did not want it on our land, and that it was also expressed that it was not to be dumped on or near Smith's Landings First Nation as well. So I am totally ready to take this to a higher political government to have this addressed before there's any movement on this dirt. Our understanding was that this was going to go down, I believe, to BC to be stored in a storage facility that has similar types of waste. So I am fully opposed to this.
Thank you. Maybe the mayor could also reach out to Chief Cheesy to ensure that Smith Landing is fully aware of what was asked of the town. Councilor Red?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the president had a heyday with this, and I'm quite prepared to put forward a recommendation leading to a motion that the town of Fort Smith totally oppose the relocation of radioactive materials from any of our properties, including the pile of radioactive waste located in the Bell Rock area, to anywhere but a proper nuclear waste disposal site.
So, Councilor Red, are you moving a recommendation?
I'll recommend that the town of Fort Smith adamantly oppose the relocation of any nuclear waste from town Fort Smith properties to anywhere but a proper certified nuclear waste disposal site.
Okay, unexpected. So, do we have a second to the motion? Councilor Westphal, you seconded the motion? Yeah. Okay, we now have a motion on the floor. Well, first of all, yeah, Councilor Correa? Councilor Westphal?
Right, just so we can discuss it, instead of just letting it die in silence. The challenge with that is that when they did present their case, they were going to be removing it, but it did, because of the sheer volume of it, they did need or specify the need for a site between here and Swan Hills, which is where I think was the intended space at the time. They needed to bring it to, so, and I don't know that that was in the Northwest Territories or Northern Alberta. It was specified at the time of presentation that they would have to actually collectively bring it somewhere first to manage. So we did ask if it was always going to be trucked continuously, and their concern was, of course, that it was a lot of trucks. And then the intent at the time was to sort it, but that sorting wouldn't be done, just outside of town. That was the idea. So that's the only concern, is that I support, yes, it should only go into a facility, but as long as we're not handicapping our own motion, maybe that's not our problem. That's their problem. Actually, now that I say that, that seems more sense. That's not really us problem.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison.
I would note that if Fitz becomes a temporary location, that's a whole lot of trucks of contaminated waste driving back and forth through town. Typically a motion of council, we say make an informed decision. I don't say, as I started this discussion, I am not properly positioned to inform council on this. This is not what we do. I'm a jack of many trades, but radioactive, hazardous waste, low level or otherwise, is not sort of in my purvey. So yeah, I feel relatively handicapped in helping inform council on this issue. My apologies.
Thank you. Renovation?
Thank you, Councillor Coupret, Councillor Westphal, and Mr. Morrison for your comments. I believe that with the presentations that we've had to date, in regards to low-level radioactive waste, aside from administration, but from the organization that is proposing to move the low-level radioactive waste and that had previously proposed to store it in our landfill facility, that I believe that the knowledge that we have to date is sufficient enough that we did decide not to have it stored at or on our facility or nearby. And so I think that with this recommendation going forward still to council, there is time to provide any backup materials to any councilors who are not aware of the discussions that have been made to date, and that I don't think that there would be any opposition to the motion that has been made. However, there will still be time for councilors to review the materials previously provided.
Okay, thank you. We have a recommendation on the floor. I think that there are quite a bit of complexities to it's not just that there's the radioactive waste in Bell Rock and Port Fitz at Halfway, some localized hotspots within the community, and also the Portsmouth landfill. As part of this equation is also radioactive waste from Delaney need to be transported out. So there's not necessarily here, but it's all part of the same project. Further discussion on the motion? Councilor Westphal?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to move the table. The recommendation at this time until further information can be brought together for council. We can clarify our position and information. I just can't, I'm looking at my books. I can't remember if I can table it after I've already seconded it. It's been a while since I've had to pick up a book. I'm not sure without the Robert's rules either, but I do think that's an appropriate course of action. Further discussion from council. Ms. Morrison.
We can forward you what I have, which is presentations previously brought by CNL, correspondence previously written by the Métis town, these sorts of things. I mean, really, if this is gonna become the staging point for this material, that means they're most likely barging, right? Because they have to get stuff off of Great Bear Lake too. So if they're barging from Great Bear Lake, then everything's portaging past Fort Smith from Bell Rock to here. The stuff further up north is nasty. There's huge quantities of it.
If I recall correctly, the estimate was 6,000 truckloads. Most of that being soil from Fort Fitz as opposed to soil from the Fort Smith landfill or any other location. But that's what I recall. Okay, so we had a move to table. Usually we'll be voting on that. Yeah. So show of hands in favor of moving to table. Sorry, do we have a second to table? I was waiting for you to find the page and the here. Further discussion. Show of hands in favor of tabling. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Morrison.
So in my list of small things, the only other thing to note is Salt River First Nation is proceeding with its proposed development in some form. I think they've moved to negotiate a contract at this point as they're dealing with cost issues. Meanwhile, their legal and our legal are working to put together basically a development agreement. If you review the town community plan, it talks about the process of subdivision requires a development agreement. So we are working on this development agreement. It's going to be relatively simple. It's going to talk about the costs of our participation, the need for us to provide engineering review of their documents because that infrastructure that they build will eventually become town infrastructure. Talk about mechanisms to allow the town to operate, maintain that infrastructure once completed, these sorts of things. And so great people are on the job there. One of the things that was determined in the process is that the MSA with Salt River was never ratified. So while it was written and it was signed by the town and the band, it required an order of council at the federal level to become law, become official. That order of council was never put into place. That order of council was the one that said that the First Nation has to allow public access to all roads on First Nations lands, amongst other things. So not a big deal because I think we all agree that we are working in the spirit and intent of the municipal services agreement, but we're using this whole process to inform the renewal or it was never in place in the first place, the implementation of a municipal services agreement with Salt River.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. I don't think those are really small things, either of those things. Any further updates from administration? We do have, under other business, CSAB expressions of interest. Perhaps there's no briefing now. Look for a recommendation and then discussion. Councillor Quebec.
Yeah, I had it written down as a note. I know at a previous meeting we discussed advertising openings on the Community Services Advisory Board. I was just wondering what was the, I do recall, I believe I saw something on the World Wide Web about that, and I was just in, what was the closing date for that call for expressions of interest?
I can't recall, but I would imagine that's why Mr. Dion's application is in the package. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. Sorry, no briefing note with the expressions of interest. Historically, we haven't brought a briefing note with expressions of interest. So the decision of council last cycle was that there was one space on Community Services Advisory Board and that we should advertise it. So it was advertised. The submission period was the end of February. So we received all the submissions that we're going to get. We actually did a broader call for all advisory boards because all advisory boards have space. We only received the applicants for Community Services Advisory Board, and this is why they're before you now. Is to make that recommendation. There's one space, 2 people.
Thank you. So past practice has generally been to appoint a selection committee to make a recommendation to council. So unless there's someone who's maybe any opposed to that, perhaps that's how we recommend we proceed. Councilor Westphal?
Technically, the advisory board application expression of interest is state's interest in sitting on the advisory board. It doesn't actually list any of them. I don't know if that, I feel like it was probably the intention considering the record, like the recreational mention. I just, from a paperwork perspective, the one is requested to be on the Community Services Advisory Board, one is requested to sit on the advisory board.
Thanks. I would imagine that's a clerical error typo. It's pretty clear based on the applicant's comments. You just heard that he wasn't applying for sustainable development. Selection committee, is that appropriate? Can we get someone to, I can't remember if we do selection committee through motions or if we just do councillors that are interested get together to discuss. Can't recall.
It's a relatively unofficial process. If you wish to make it official, you have to go through a whole cycle of council just to get your committee approved. So.
Exactly. Are there members of council interested in participating in a selection committee to make recommendations to the regular meeting of council March 16th? Mr. Westphal, you volunteering? Really would be ideal. Councilor Gibrad, Councilor Campbell, Councilor Cox, it is. There you go. Selection committee will bring a recommendation back for March 16th. And next, we have an in-camera session. Looking for someone, but before we move, I'd just like to thank Ms. Brevin for being in the gallery. It's nice to see you here. Looking for a recommendation to move in camera. Renee?
I move that council move in camera in accordance with the CTB Act Section 23(3)(f) for the acquisition or disposal of property by or on behalf of the municipal corporation.
Thank you. For a second. Councilor Collins. Discussion. Show hands in favor. Moving in camera and 9:40. I guess, yes, we just have a quick break to